Good morning. Feels like I just saw you. This morning, I thought we'd talk about what Macy talks about as the miracle of mind. And so when we talk about mind in Western thought, this is not exactly the same thing, right? We think of mind kind of as synonymous with brain as the private organ producing thoughts. Here, we're going to use that differently. So it's not just the gray matter between your ears squished inside of your skull, but it's the field of awareness that arises through relationships. So as I was thinking about this as an image that we could hold to as to frame the talk, here's what came to mind. Imagine a night sky filled with stars. Out of those ancient fires came the atoms that now form your brain. And in this moment, those atoms are aware of themselves. So that's how I'll start us off. Hold on to that image. I might come back to it later. So what is this mind beyond the skull that Macy talks about and that we often encounter in our practice? The miracle is not cleverness. It is the cosmos becoming aware of itself. So mind is not separate from nature. It's nature noticing itself. Mind is a continuously present process of knowing rather than a static entity. It's not a thing at all. Gregory Bateson, I'm smitten with, and so is Joanna Macy. He was a cyberneticist and an interesting anthropologist, interesting thinker. But he said, saw the mind in the circuits of information that interconnect and guide living systems. He said the total self-corrective unit that processes information is a system whose boundaries do not coincide with the boundaries either of the body or what is popularly called self or consciousness. So even from that sort of scientific view, the idea is that this extends well beyond our common and conventional conception of it. So we've talked about forests, mycelial networks, ecosystems displaying mind-like responsiveness. This is evident in the world that we occupy. And so we can also think of our practice of sitting as the universe knowing itself in your particular presence. In your particularity, that's where it comes to know itself. And so Shikantaza invites us to direct participation with that field of awareness, with nothing to add and nothing to remove. So I want to walk you through three of the kind of insights that Macy has around, from a living systems view, around this kind of miracle of mind. And in the first, she talks about self as choice maker. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about this idea of positive disintegration, which I'll have you read along with me so you get a sense of Macy's voice, which is interesting. And the last one, which she calls the we are the world, or kind of collective bodhicitta. So if the song starts going through your head at the same time, that's okay too. It's not far off. It did for me. It's gone, yeah, right? And I've lost you. Come back. So first, self as choice maker. You can think of as a system becomes more complex, it gains autonomy. So its internal loops multiply and can no longer be fully steered from the outside. So here's a metaphor, an example. Think of a sailboat with multiple sails and rudders. The more elements it has to balance, the more it can tack and choose course rather than drift with the wind. A sailboat with a single sail has less at its disposal. So that complexity allows for a bit more choice. If we think of human consciousness, our nervous systems reached a tipping point where trial and error survival were too slow. So self-reflective consciousness evolved so that we could imagine futures and select from among them. So you can think of pausing before speaking, before saying a harsh word, perhaps to your child who has done something for the umpteenth time that's making you crazy. Not that I'm thinking of anything in particular, but the moment, just a random example, right? The moment you notice the impulse and decide otherwise is the self emerging as a choice maker. And notice that the self is emerging through the choice rather than there is a self making the choice. There's a different relationship that's happening. There's another piece here you can think of, the ethical charge. So circumstances can be dire, but the response is never predetermined. Let me say that again because it might be hopeful in this. Circumstances can be dire, but the response is never predetermined. Macy says we discover who we are in our choices. And this always, for me, reminds me of Viktor Frankl's work. So if you're not familiar with Viktor Frankl, psychologist who was a young man surviving in the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, developed a theory of logotherapy, if I remember right. And he, as said, described the last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude, even when all else is stripped away. And he's saying about that in the bleakest of circumstances. So that's sort of what choice is. I want to explore this positive disintegration piece with you together. So I brought handouts. So I thought we might read this one aloud and respond to it a little bit. Jessica, do you mind starting?
Positive disintegration.
Sometimes the best choice is to let go, to fall apart.
Dangers to their survival prompt living systems to evolve. When feedback tells them and continues to tell them that their old norms and behaviors are no longer effective in current conditions, they respond by changing. They adapt to such challenges by seeking and incorporating more appropriate norms. They search for values and goals that allow them to navigate in more varied conditions with greater resilience and connectivity. This is serious business because a system's norms are its internal codes by which it defines itself. Ervin Laszlo calls this process exploratory self-reorganization.
In humans, our internal codes and organizing principles are basic to our sense of self. The realization that they are no longer valid can be very disorienting, making us frighteningly unsure of who we are. This sense of being off track can be experienced in religious traditions as a call to repentance. This loss of previously valid norms is painful and confusing, but psychiatrist Kazimierz Dabrowski calls it positive disintegration because it allows more adaptive understanding of self and world to arise.
In periods of major cultural transition, the experience of positive disintegration is widespread. Such is the case now in this time of the great unraveling. Everywhere anomalies appear that don't fit our expectations because, in systems terms, they don't match previous codes and beliefs. Bereft of comfort, confidence, and old coping strategies, we may feel that our world is falling apart. Sometimes we panic or shut down. Sometimes we get mean and turn on each other.
Today, in the early 21st century, we face challenges humankind has never faced in our 150,000-year journey. Never before have we seen mass extinction of species brought on by human depredation of habitats and ecosystems. Never before have we grappled with human-caused climate disruption across the planet. Never before have we exposed ourselves and all other life forms to the levels of radiation and radioactive particles currently being released by the production of nuclear energy and weapons, massively intensified by the catastrophes on the scale of Fukushima. Never before has the biosphere endured such onslaughts of chemical pollution and genetic tampering, including many whose consequences we cannot ever undo.
It's difficult to comprehend the enormity of these assaults on life. We want to turn away. We have no formulas or examples to follow as we struggle to cope. History cannot instruct us, except by analogy. Our old codes do not apply. no matter how hard we try.
It helps to recall that the life living through us has repeatedly died to old forms and old ways. Positive disintegration is integral to the evolution of living systems. We know this dying in the explosion of supernovas, the relinquishment of gills and fins and moving onto dry land, the splitting of seeds in the soil. We know this in the cyclical growth, flowering, and decomposition of plants through the seasons. As they live out their life cycle in one form, plants break down into compost and nourish other life forms, including new plants of the same species. Our own life story attests to this as we learn to move beyond the safeties and dependencies of childhood.
It helps to recall that the life living through us has repeatedly died to old forms and old ways. Positive disintegration is integral to the evolution of living systems. We know this dying in the explosion of supernovas. This is the same paragraph, you know.
Oh, sorry about that. That was a mistake.
Do we want to repeat it?
No, we're good.
Okay, okay.
There's an extra sentence, and that's what I was trying to catch. I made a mistake. Yeah. Our own life, sorry, that so too, in each case, at the very bottom. That's my mistake. I'll finish it. So in each case, what feels like disintegration is also reorganization, clearing the ground for new patterns of life. So too in our collective experience. The unraveling we face today can be the compost for a more just and life-sustaining society. As you, I'm curious, is there particular lines or ideas that resonate with you in this, coming off of the Shambhala prophecy? This felt interesting to visit.
It helps to recall that the life living through us has repeatedly died to old forms and old ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the idea of being compost. I love that. Nurturing the next generation, next thing.
Bridget?
Well, I didn't have an email from you, but the term that of positive disintegration made me curious. So that's what that one 2-word combination.
Mm-hmm.
Up in the first paragraph, I like they search for values and goals that allow them to navigate in more varied conditions with greater resilience and connectivity. I like that last part, in connectivity, as part of that adaptation.
Mm-hmm. So there's sort of 3 moments that are happening inside of this positive disintegration, right? So we have the feedback and old codes. You can think of kind of like a snake, it's shedding its skin. The thing that used to work no longer works anymore. And so we're moving beyond that. That composting idea, right? And we've experienced this directly. We can think of adolescence even as where an identity crisis dissolves childhood certainties into a different kind of personality. We've lived inside of this already in smaller cycles. And then obviously we're dealing with things now on a scale that's different, at a planetary scale. So as we think about it at that level, a forest fire clearing old growth so new species can germinate, devastation and renewal are intertwined. I think about when I would go backpacking in the Sierras, you'd see different places where the Forest Service would intentionally burn the undergrowth because that was actually in service of supporting life, which was always a strange thing as a kid. I remember walking through these burnt areas going, how is this good, right? And then my dad would kind of explain what the consequences would be if we didn't engage in that way. So those are our first 2 kind of facets of this: the selfish choice maker, the positive disintegration, and then we have the we are the world, or the collective bodhicitta. And the way that Macy thinks about this is that we can think of having, we are in part sort of Earth's immune system. So she cites Paul Hawken, who likens the countless local groups who are trying to engage in particular actions as white blood cells swarming to heal a wound. So imagine spontaneous climate strikes in cities across the world, and yet millions acting without a single commander, sensing danger and responding. I was thinking about the hurricane in Houston years ago, where people here just dropped everything and went to help. So, immune system response. The other part of this is it's life defending life. So, motivation is not private profit. It's not some sort of particular self-interest, but it's the pulse of the larger organism protecting itself. So in that mycelial network, you'll see their underground scuttling of nutrients because apart to a stressed tree. So each node recognizes, in a way, that it's part of a whole. And this also points to the intelligence of connection. So diversity and feedback create resilience, and the network learns as it acts. So you can think of a flock of starlings. There's no leader, yet the flock turns as one, each bird adjusting to its neighbor in real time. These are the kinds of ways that mind manifests itself in these three domains: the self as choice maker, positive disintegration, and we are the world. And for me, as I was reading this again, I think even the positive disintegration, which feels a little dire at first, kind of gives a different frame to what we might be experiencing on the day-to-day. And for me, that was a source of hope, a sort of sense of, I can see this from a different angle rather than very, very small, conditioned fear and anger responses that can easily permeate me. If we think of this through the lens of shikantaza, then when we're on the cushion, zazen is not self-improvement, but it's a direct revelation of that field of mind, of these kind of qualities of relating. And so as much as consumer culture and busyness want to hijack our attention, that very act of settling onto the cushion is again a revolutionary act and restores your capacity and life's capacity through you to sense signals that can be heard and acted upon. So the thoughts and sensations and sounds that are not intrusions, they are the field of mind itself as you're sitting on the cushion. And so that awareness of awareness embodies this very miracle that Macy is describing. And so as I was thinking back through ZGU's Amai again, I was looking again through Macy's lens to say, where do I see some of these ideas emerging? And here are a few that I caught. So as Dogen writes about practicing in the midst of self-fulfilling samadhi, Dogen points to realization arising from the system's own dynamics, from nothing outside directs it. So Macy calls this the self-organizing intelligence of living systems, where order emerges when conditions are ripe. That's one way you might see these two overlapping. At another moment, he says, when for a moment you express the Buddha's seal, the entire sky turns into enlightenment. So one moment of sitting resonates through the whole field. The boundary of my mind dissolves. It's not private. So Macy similarly noticed that the small shifts in a network can repattern the entire system. He later writes, all beings obtain pure body and mind. So awakening is not private, but realization ripples through the entire web of life. So Macy's Great Turning likewise spreads resilience as a collective feedback that moves through the earth as a body, the whole earth body. When we think of earth, grass, trees, walls, tiles, and pebbles, all engaging in Buddha activity as we're about to chant, Dogen gives an agency, and it's not gives agency, he honors the natural agency that's present in the natural world, in mountains and stones. And Macy affirms the mind events in every open system, it's nature thinking through itself. So again, similar ideas moving here. And I think it's heartening to then think about through this, all this doesn't appear within perception. So it's immediate realization. So practice and realization are one movement, not something to observe. Just as Macy reminds us that system intelligence is lived from within, not measured from outside. All of these kind of glimpses give us a view and a way of relating that's a bit different. And as I was trying to integrate this, I started to think about Macy is giving us kind of call it the science of interdependence. What can we observe kind of empirically and understand? And Dogen is giving us the poetry of awakening, and the two overlap beautifully. So each time we sit, the great turning is not an idea that's out there. It is this breath, this awareness, recognizing the cosmos from the inside. And so as I was reflecting on these last night, there was this one line that kept coming into my brain and eventually fell out of my face or fingers as a poem. So I thought I'd try and share that with you, if that's okay. It's the first one of these little lines came out. I don't know what the title of this is yet. Call it Zazen, call it just sitting, call it something. But here's the poem. Hinge of the universe, where starborn matter turns and remembers. The sky pours breath through us. Leaves sift sunlight into air. Rivers pulse through blood. Mountains stay the spine. Soil warms resting palms. Listen, this sitting is the world naming itself without a word. Thank you very much. So I'm early, but what questions or reflections are bubbling up for you this morning?
John, Eric, and I were talking about this during tacos yesterday, as one does. The idea of the starling or the school of fish, these ways of being, where we are moving in unison, and I've experienced that innumerable times in the Zendo, and I feel like that's it's hard to describe, but I notice it in moments like when we're chanting and you can't tell whose voice. There's one voice, or when we're walking in Kinhin and there's one walking, one movement. And it arises and it passes the life, death, life cycle of even that perception. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there.
So I keep thinking about this systems thinking and this great, I'm sorry,
Great unraveling.
Unraveling, yes, the great unraveling. And I'm trying to think about this in the context of our world today and what I just continually perceive as maybe in this terms of a breakdown, but it feels stronger than that. It doesn't actually feel organic. It feels like actively hostile and violent and all of that. And so it's helping me in a way to think of this as part of the system is responding that way. But I'm struggling to think about or to regard Zazen or our collective awareness, I guess. Like, what does that have to do with it? I'm trying to figure out how those things interact, and I'm kind of needing that, so that this just doesn't feel like an isolated response of nice people sitting.
So we're not just hiding out in the Zendo.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious, how do others experience that? So how do you make sense of the relationship between sitting and meeting the world in this moment that feels like disintegration?
I love this question, and I struggle with it too. And I was thinking about it during your talk, Nate, which by the way, that poem. Thank you.
Mm.
So beautiful. I'm super tired because I was at a political organizing meeting last night that felt really important. And so it was really fresh for me how learning to sit and listen to these other voices who had different ideas about what to do felt super entwined with my sitting practice.
Mm.
And again, I'm with like-minded people, so it's different. But even amongst this group of like-minded people, the willingness to be open and refreshed by their pivoting and changing course, because we're supposed to select a candidate to support for the US Congress, but with the redistricting, we've had to redo everything and adapt and be open to what I see as very evil, destructive, manipulative forces are trying to do. And so the sitting practice is what allows us to kind of be like, okay, whether or not any outcomes will come, because we want outcomes. I feel like we really need outcomes, and it's hard not to be attached to those when you put a lot of energy into it. But this helps me loosen my grip and trust the other people in the process a little bit more. That's just my experience right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other responses? Relationship between Zazen and this disintegration?
Oh, so I was going to say something different maybe. So I'm kind of taking the role of doubting Thomas and thinking also about Okamura. Was asked once, do you believe what Dogen said? And he said, no, I don't believe it, but I know that he's right.
Mm-hmm.
And, whatever happens here, we go home to our spouse or kids or friends and we try to say it, and they look at us like we're crazy. And so that's a part of me, that I am an isolated being, and then I hear all this stuff and, oh yeah, I'm part of this bigger thing. And so I'm just kind of gauging, to be honest, like, where am I believing this?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this of course is an ongoing long-term question, right? And what it feels like to me is that before I really knew how to sit, I ran around like a chicken with its head cut off. Save the whales, protest over here. I felt really scattered, I would say. And I wasn't very effective in what I was doing, any of it. And so one of the things that I've realized about sitting is that that's where the wisdom comes from.
Mm.
If you're going to do something, you want it to be a wise thing and a compassionate thing. But I don't have a lot of clarity about that in my head. I only have this clarity when I open a space where I can settle into that Buddha heart and mind, and not my ideas about what I should be doing, And there's a certain point where I thought, oh, the thing I'm doing in the world is this. This is what I'm doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the best thing I can think of to do, is to provide a place where people can come and build wisdom. That was my sense of it. Now, everybody's experience is different, but in order to really hear deeply, listen deeply to that deep, deep wisdom, in the midst of all this destruction that's happening, it's real disintegration, and you have to have the long view to consider it positive disintegration, right? Because right now it's pretty horrible. But what it's building in people is going to be a resistance to this ever happening again, right? And a certain resilience in recognizing it's not up to the politicians, it's up to us on the ground to create the society that we want, right? So, but to get there, we have to open a space where we can, dismantle some of our opinions and judgments about what ought to happen, what isn't happening, the bad things that are happening, so that we can get clear about what is possible. What is it possible for us to do? And how we can build resilience in the midst of really awful circumstances. So I don't know anything else that can do that except Zazen.
Mhm.
I actually don't. So that's my thought on it anyway.
I had a similar response. I see you, Stephanie. A similar response with, I think of it as quieting my brain so I can listen to my mind or the mind, which sounds a little odd maybe, but the idea of, for me, is I recognize in my own life when I have, let's say I've not been sitting, how do I live and make choices? And then when I am, how do I live and make choices? So I have that sort of embodied experience of this is incredibly important as a source of wisdom, and my brain doesn't understand it. I can't make sense of it in any way, shape, or form, but I've lived it enough to know that I trust it as a source of wisdom. Stephanie.
I was thinking about the in the early days of Buddhist Action Now, there was a protest at the Capitol, and several of us went. And one of the things we talked about before we went was presenting a being there as a group of people who were not taking sides, but were just kind of being witnesses and being present, really fully present. And we had the opportunity to, I think, embody that when there was a man who was very, very agitated and trying to create a ruckus. And there were like 4 or 5 of us, and we just kind of stood in a line between him and the larger group that was there for the protest. And we didn't engage in making things worse, but I think our presence was very calming. I've never forgotten that, and I can't remember what the march was because we went to so many in the beginning, and but that idea of just being offering a choice, a different choice than what was happening in this man's life, felt like what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I like that everybody, that question that Susan asked, everybody sort of has it hits them differently,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And how it hits me is uh, greed, hatred, and delusion, I now fully avow. And what we were saying earlier, that we are like, I am special and I'm special like everyone else. I am nice and I'm nice like everyone else. I don't think we're more good than anybody else. And there was that reading yesterday that, like we all have elements of nice or good and elements of evil within us. It's not like the evil's out there and we gotta go out there, and it's very interwoven. And I see that in the, I mean, I mentioned this before, like the target shooter, some elements of his background feel very similar. And um, the, so Zazen seems to, kind of create a space for um, these things, for the awareness of all these things, and um, and I guess the space that people have talked about, um, and being able to respond and not kind of react to whatever um, uh, temporary things are floating up or whatever. But I'm curious. So, Susan, now you've heard from a whole lot of people. What lands for you now? The question that you asked.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer that. I mean, I have heard, and I experienced this myself the I was going to say the value, but the rightness, I guess, of what we're doing and what I come to do on the cushion, and I guess it just helps me regard all of this with a little greater equanimity, and maybe it helps not to just be panicking at every excuse me fucking thing that's happening, because it just is kind of relentless, and so it does help. I don't think the reaction to the relentless assault is helpful. So this does help kind of clear a space for regarding this with, I don't know whether equanimity is the right word, but with a calmer mind, just to sort of think about how to respond.
In some ways, the reactivity, or the easy habitual reactivity, feeds the thing, just fans the flames. That the ways that division is being sown. So any opportunity that we take to say, no, not that, I'm not responding from that place, I'm going to settle into this basic awareness and tap into what's really true, rather than this that you're fanning and stirring up, is hugely beneficial.
I just had a quick thought. You know how Flint talks a lot about spiritual bypassing? Could there also be a risk, though, of political bypassing or activism bypassing? So we can feel all these great things about our practice, but we have to be conscious of not doing that, hiding out in the Zendo. Like you could check out from engagement, and I think that's, yes, I understand why we're here, why I'm here, but I also want to not be a political bypasser or activist. There's got to be a better word for it, but engagement.
Bodhisattva.
Oh.
Bodhisattva acts. A bodhisattva doesn't just withdraw, right? That's why we're talking about the Shambhala warriors.
Yeah.
They're doing it often in subtle ways, but it's really about that action that comes from that place, right, of care for the world.
Okay, thank you.
Rosemary.
Yes. First of all, I so appreciate Macy's pointing to the dissolution, the positive dissolution. And it's such a practice opportunity in impermanence, just knowing that things will fall apart. And then in terms of shikantaza, for me, the one of the biggest obstacles to concentrating is a sense of responsibility. It's the last thing that I can let go of. And what I realize is it's such a gift to even think of that and think of allowing that. And so it's been, there's some grief in that, and joy as well. And in terms of, what do you do? I think I heard from Stephanie, who may have heard from you, Peg, about Braver Angels. And I've been exploring it since the election, and had the opportunity to go to a play that, so this is a group that it's nonpartisan, and it recruits people leaning left and leaning right together who are interested in actually hearing the other side. And this play was created by such a group, and it was quite amazing. And I got to speak with them, and they said, well, there's no alliance in New Jersey. How about that? I said, well, that was about a month ago. And so now I'm talking to them about that. I have no idea, I'll have to be trained to be some kind of moderator, have some one-on-one conversations myself with folks of opposite opinions, and see what that's about. But since the election, I just have wanted to listen. What does it mean to you to have that opinion? And if I say that back to you, is that am I reading you right? Just that, persuading, just, this divisiveness, I think, is kind of at the core. So anyway, that's, wish me luck. Thank you.
Well, and as I hear you I think that there's some myriad opportunities for right action, and right action is going to be context dependent, and it's going to be situational based on what your skills and position are in the world. But right action is a heck of a lot harder to see without right view, right? Without sitting clearly and getting some spaciousness to know what it is that's needed and what's possible. So that might also be an offering too, to say, can I sit here so that I can see clearly what's needed and see clearly how to respond? Okay.